I'd like to introduce my good friend Antonio Carlos Rodrigues do Amaral. Did I say everything with the correct pronunciation?
Correct, perfect.
I don't roll my R's very well, but I'm working on it. All right, Antonio, this is truly a global cities conference, and I wanted to take this opportunity to briefly highlight your work, your background, and the center that you're starting in Brazil. Antonio was introduced to CAPI this year. He has been studying at Columbia, working here, and is in the process of starting their version of CAPI at Mackenzie University in Brazil. So I wanted to make sure that we're able to highlight the work that they're going to be doing and talk a little bit about the role that they're hoping the center will play. So just to start, can you just tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up here at Columbia?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me here, Berit. It has been a pleasure to work with you, with CAPI, and here in Columbia. So basically, I'm a lawyer for 30 years, getting old, and have been a professor of law for the last 25 years or so in Brazil. And in 2015 more or less, I became involved as a senior advisor in an internal investigation of Eletrobras in Brazil. Eletrobras is the biggest energy company in Latin America. You have Petrobras, that is our oil and gas company, and Eletrobras. So because of this, I was dealing with authorities in Brazil for many agencies, analyzing our legislation, also analyzing the questions involving leniency agreements for companies, everything. And since we did not have a good structure for putting in place leniency agreements specifically for companies, was one of the reasons that I came here to Columbia to study and to better understand the models that you have for parallel investigations and leniency agreements for companies in order to punish the individuals who are responsible for the crimes, but let the companies survive. What unfortunately is not what happened in Brazil right now. But.
Well, since you mentioned it, there has been a lot of attention over the last few years on the issue of corruption in Brazil. I'm sure most people have heard of the Operation Car Wash in Brazil, which started as a money laundering investigation and then proceeded to grow exponentially into a massive multi-country takedown. When I was reading that as of May this year, the car wash investigation had yielded 90 criminal accusations against 429 different individuals and 244 convictions, and the bribes in these cases had totaled about $1.6 billion.
Yeah, I would say that this bribe is too low. Actually, it's much more. Yeah, because only here in the United States, Petrobras made an agreement to return $2 billion to investors in the United States. So somehow the number is, people say during the last 20 years, somehow in the range of $40 billion. So it's a lot of money. And so now it's involving 11 countries. So what happened in particular aspects of the reason why the car wash operation grew as it has grown in Brazil was because there was 4 particular things that happened in Brazil in 2013. Brazil was expecting to have the World Cup in 2014, and the population becomes a little bit upset with the level, what we call the standard that FIFA, the International Federation of Football, put for building the stadiums. So the people start to say, okay, we have this standard for the stadiums, but we don't have the same standard for healthcare, for transportation. So there was this huge popular movement in the streets. And in response to that, the government, President Dilma at that time, who was impeached 2 years after, enacted 2 laws. One was the law for organized crime, and which implemented the plea bargain agreements with more, let's say, range, a broader range for plea bargain agreements. Also, we implement the law for what we call the clean company law, that's anti-corruption law. And at the beginning of 2016, the Supreme Court made a very important movement that was to allow the person to be detained after the decision of the second degree court, of the appeals court. Before that, the person would only be really arrested when the case finished completely. So if you are a wealthy person, you have the best lawyers, it takes like 10, 20 years for the case to finish. It means that what values was impunity. So with these 4 changes in the culture and the beginning of car wash operation 2014 in Curitiba with some young lawyers, young judges, young public prosecutors with new view against impunity. We grow a lot, and we have very successful outcomes from this operation as of today.
And sort of in the wake of this just major public corruption investigation and exposure of the real structural corruption that existed in Brazil, can you just talk briefly about what efforts have been made to try to rebuild public trust in a way, to try and combat this corruption from a structural level?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a long explanation, but to make short, I would just say that there was a change in the view of deployment because we put in jail the wealthiest construction guys, I mean, the owners of the biggest companies in Brazil. That was unbelievable 5 years ago in this sense. We have 1/3 of politicians in the Congress that are under investigation. And so you can understand that there is then a huge fight against the car wash operation itself. So on one side, you have this change of the cultural aspects in Brazil, if a lot of people fight against corruption, but we have a lot of very, very powerful and wealthy people fighting against the car wash operation. So I think we had a very important progress in terms of the finding the guilty guys, put them in jail. But the problem that I saw, was the reason that I came here, was, as I said, regarding the companies. Let's take the example of Odebrecht. Odebrecht, I think, was the biggest construction company in Latin America. They had 300,000 employees when the car wash operation started. Now they have 70,000. So they lost in the last 4 years 230,000 employees. And so we have the president of this company arrested, the founder of the company arrested, a lot of officers arrested. So what's important? Of course, you punish the people who are guilty for the wrongdoings. But the problem is that we have not been able to put a good structure, legal structure, to keep the companies going on. So it's a kind of thing that we are facing right now in Brazil. How to solve this kind of, how to have an equilibrium when you punish the people, but we keep the companies operating. And that is one of the reasons why we also founded this center at Mackenzie, inspired by CAPI, by you, by Jennifer, all the work that you have been doing here. There was wonderful work here in Colombia. So we would like to analyze these concepts in a more broad view, international, comparative view, to see how can we better off our system, punish the individuals, but let the companies survive. So that's one of the reasons why we founded this center, to discuss these aspects. Besides other, we have a more broad view in this Mackenzie Center for what we call integrity. We call integrity not only for regarding corruption itself, but as a whole view of the system. Talk about from taxation. I mean, the tax system should be also filled in with the concept of integrity, with fairness, efficiency. So artificial intelligence, big data operations, blockchain, how we put everything together when we build public policies in Brazil. And this center aims to deal with it.
Well, it's so important for us at CAPI to have these kind of collaborations, especially to highlight them on a day like today, when we are focusing on international efforts to combat corruption. So we are thrilled to join forces with you for our conference this spring, talking about corruption in Brazil, and it's the first of what I hope will be many collaborations.